And so I have had to think very deeply on what it means to have grown up in a primarily white neighborhood, to be born into, to go to school, to study, to learn, to play, to worship, to love, to work, and to die in segregation, and not have one single person who loved, mentored, or guided me convey that there was any loss. And I'm going to repeat that because I think it's very profound and I really want us to sit with it. That I could live my whole life in segregation. In fact, if I followed the trajectory that my loving parents laid out for me in my good neighborhood and my good school and my good college and my good career in which I would ideally rise to the top, I could easily never have any consistent, ongoing, authentic relationships with people of color, and not one person who guided me ever conveyed that there was loss. Just sit with that for a moment, that there is no inherent value in the perspectives or experiences of people of color. If my parents, if my schools, if my curriculum, if my teachers, if my government saw value in those perspectives, I would be given those perspectives, but I wasn't given those perspectives. And that shapes my relationships. It shapes what I care about. It shapes what I see, what I don't see, who I build my life with, and who I don't build my life with. And that is the level where we really need to look at race inside of us and with us. In the line of work that I do, it's a breakthrough if you can get white people to acknowledge that our race privileges us in this society, right? That is like the second coming, to get white folks to admit that we are privileged by our race. But even that begins to get superficial. And you'll hear white people say, just because of the color of my skin, you know, I have these things, as if this is just an accident that happens. And I want to take us deeper. I want to take us inside this skin. My psychosocial development was inculcated in the water of white supremacy. That is what I call this system. I don't mean the KKK. I mean a system in which whiteness and white people are central and seen as inherently superior to people of color. My personality was formed in that water. My worldview was formed in that water. I didn't choose it. It isn't my fault. I'm not racked with guilt about it, but I am responsible for changing it, because the default of our society is the reproduction of racism. It's built into every system and every institution. And if we just live our lives and carry on in the most comfortable ways for us, we will necessarily reproduce it. There is no neutral space. Inaction is a form of action. One of the most effective adaptations of racism since the civil rights era is this idea of a racist is a bad person, and if you're not racist, you're a good person. What I call the good-bad binary. And we can all fill it in, right? So if you're racist, then you're prejudiced and mean-spirited and bigoted and ignorant and Southern and probably drive a pickup truck. So we got some classism in there, right? This is our racist. And if you're not racist, you're good and you're progressive and you're open-minded and you're educated and you're northern. And this binary is probably the #1 construct that keeps racism today in place and makes it nearly impossible to talk to white people about racism. The defensiveness we have comes from this binary. What we hear is, you just said I was a bad person. And so this binary sets it up to be mutually exclusive. You cannot be a good person and be complicit with racism. So you'll notice in the news when racism gets talked about, they'll bring in the evidence they'll have to defend the person that's being accused of racism is, but he's a really nice person. Right? Because again, it's mutually exclusive. We have to understand racism as a system that we're all a part of.